Hey there, YouTube. Back at it again with another review of the One Piece Set 1 Romance Dawn, and this time we are going to be taking a look at the green cards. These are probably the ones I am the least familiar with, so because of that, I am the most excited to read these over, and the most excited to get these wrong, because once again, if you haven't seen the other videos, this is the first time I'm taking a look at a lot of these cards, so we can read a lot of these cards together. So first off, we have the Kozuki Oden leader, which I was kind of surprised to see, and I'm very excited to see this card, who is your standard mono leader stat, so 5 life slash attribute power 5, whose type is Land of Wano and the Kozuki clan. So his effect is during the main phase, once per turn, you can trash a Land of Wano card from your hand and set up to 2 of your Dawn cards as active. I think this is very interesting. Being able to reuse Dawn, I think, has a lot of potential, and unlike a deck like, say, the start deck Luffy, where you do effectively reuse the Dawn cards, but you can only use them to pump up power, this lets you potentially play even more cards. I think this is very interesting, and it kind of makes me excited to look at green and potentially play this, because this is a very neat looking card, and I really hope something like this sees play. And if you've seen the purple deck, I was pretty disappointed by the Kurozumi Orochi cards as well as the Smile cards, so I'm hoping the Land of Wano and Kozuki cards for green don't disappoint to the same extent. So next we have Ashura Doji as an uncommon, who is a character cost 3 slash attribute, power 4, counter 1, who is another Land of Wano and another Akazaya 9. So it's good to see that the Scabbards are getting their representation, whose effect is Dawn 1. If your opponent has 2 or more arrested characters, it gets power plus 2,000. I think this is decent. It has the potential to hit 7,000, and it's looking like the Zoro leader out of the red list might be one of the better decks in the format, and because of how many attacks it can make, this can easily hit 7,000. So I think this has potential to be seen in definitely within an Odin deck with at least a couple of copies, so I can see this having some use. Next is another uncommon for Izo, shout out to my boy, who is another character, cost 3, attribute ranged, power 3, counter 2, Land of Wano, and a former Whitebeard pirate. Makes me sad every time I read the former in that attribute, whose effect is on play. You can rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. I'm unsure how I feel about the during your turn resting effects. I know it can target blockers, which is pretty good, so it depends a lot on how many blockers people wind up playing as the game begins to develop, but because of that, I'm not super convinced on this card, especially because while it has a decent effect, it only has 3,000 power for cost 3, so it's not going to be your biggest hitter, but you have Odin to reuse Dawn cards that you tap just to attach it to him to hit 5. So I can see Izo seeing play. I definitely want to see a bit more about how impactful during your turn resting your opponent's cards will wind up being, though. Next is Inuarashi. I really like this art. I love this pose. I like the sword flare. Who's another character, cost 3, attribute slash, power 4, counter 1, who's a Mink, Land of Wano, and Akazaya 9 types, whose effect is Dawn times 2. When it's attacking, you can set one of your Dawn as active. I really like this. I think this might actually see play, just because, unlike most other card games, because the One Piece game doesn't have a strict battle phase, you can attack with Inuarashi, untap things, and use it to play more cards. So having an Inuarashi and Odin as your leader means you could effectively reuse 3 Dawn, which is its own type of ramp separate from what purple does. And if you have 2 Inuarashi and you're able to give them each 2 Dawn, you can effectively reuse 4 in the later stages of the game. I think this is really neat. So honestly, the more I read, I'm actually getting pretty excited for the Odin deck, and I might end up looking into it myself. Next is our first rare from the set, being Okiku. Shout out to my girl, who is cost 3, attribute slash, power 5, no counter, color green, type Land of Wano, and another Akazaya 9, whose effect is Dawn 1. When attacking once per turn, you can rest one of your opponent's characters with cost 5 or less. I think this is a strictly better Izo, if I'm being honest. Izo has the counter, which is definitely good and worth considering, but the fact that she can do it on attack as opposed to on play, which means she can recycle doing it, but also because um, Yeah, that's the main reason. Because she can use this multiple turns and she has the higher base attack, I think this has a lot of potential. So I really like Okiku for this deck. Next is Otsuru, who's looking like a vanilla cost 1 attribute wisdom, power 3, counter 1, land of Wano. This is your generic card. This is like Karu from the Luffy start deck. This is stuff that we come to expect from this cost and stats. Next is Kawamatsu. I love this art. Just the swirl effect around him. This is beautiful. So it's cost 2, attribute slash power 3, counter 1, who's a fishman from the land of Wano, and Akazaya 9. No effect, but it does have the trigger where you can play it. Again, this is another thing where I am not super experienced. I have not had the chance to play many games yet, so it really does depend on how many triggers we want to see in the deck ratios. So the fact that it has a trigger is something to that's worth noting, but its stats aren't phenomenal. Like I think because it has the trigger, it had to either have higher cost or lower power, but having only 3,000 is not something I'm wowed by. So I think this might be one you're going to want to avoid. But again, I could be very wrong. I have very little game experience outside of the tutorial app and very non existent experience with the Wano Green deck. So please let me know if I'm wrong. Next is going to be Conjuro, who is cost 2, attribute slash power 3, counter 1 type Land of Wano and Akazaya 9, whose effect is Dawn 1. When attacking, you can KO one of your opponent's rested characters with cost 2 or less, and on KO, your opponent has to trash a card from hand. I think this is quite solid, actually. The fact that it's looking like most decks are going to be running cards with lower costs and maybe even attack with them when they're rested means that Conjuro's effect is pretty decent. The fact that it has 3,000 power means you're going to want to give it 2 so it can actually hit into a leader, means pulling off its effect isn't that much of a tall order because if you're running it, you're going to want to use this anyways. And it has an on KO effect too that isn't even half bad. I wouldn't be surprised if Conjuro saw play. This is pretty neat. Next is another uncommon for killer, more just beautiful art. Cost 2, attribute slash, power 2, counter 1, type supernova and kid pirates, who is a blocker, and Dawn 1 on block. If you have 3 or more characters, draw a card. I think this is fine, but to some extent overrated. I think it's good as a blocker, but because it's a blocker, you're probably not going to attack with it, but you still have to give it Dawn anyways. And while it has the draw effect, because it only has 2,000 power, it doesn't get the power during your opponent's turn from the Dawn. So because it has low power, it's probably going to get KO'd when you block with it, so you're really only going to get the one draw out of it. It's a blocker with an on-block effect, so we'll definitely see play because of that. But I think its non-blocker effect isn't super phenomenal, but it'll probably see play in the Odin deck just because it gives you the ability to draw a card that you could trash with his effect on your next turn after you block with Killer. So this is good. It'll see play. I'm just not stupefied. Next is our first SR being Kinemon, whose cost 6, attribute slash power 6 from the Land of Wano and also part of the Akazaya 9. His effect is on play if your leader is Odin, so great that we have leader-specific support. You can play an Akazaya 9 character with cost of 3 or less from your hand for free, so that's effectively a value. That's very good, because that's effectively a value of 9, because 6 from Kin and you get 3 for free. So, and you also could potentially untap 2, so you effectively pay 6, but could, provided you use Odin's discard, get 5 back just by playing a 3 for free, and the discard to get 2 more. That's solid, and its other effect is Dawn 1. When attacking, once per turn, you can set one of your Akazaya 9 characters with a cost of 3 or less as active. This is incredible. The fact that it lets you play a card for 3 or less for free, as well as lets you untap an attacker, this is so good. And I love multi-attack decks like this, so I'm honestly getting more and more interested by the Odin deck as we go on. This is so good. Next is a rare for Kozuki Momonosuke, whose cost is 1, attribute is slash, but he has no power. Counter 1 from the land of Wano and part of the Kozuki clan, whose effect is during the main phase. You can pay 1 Dawn to rest it, check the top 5, reveal a land of Wano, and add it to your hand, then place it at the bottom, the rest at the bottom of your deck. This is very good for the Odin deck. I know I derided Tama for having 0 power, but the fact that its effect is during the main phase and not on play means if your opponent keeps Momonosuke alive, you could keep reusing his effect, but also because it searches the land of Wano for 1 Dawn, you can search for the land of Wano card, then immediately pitch it with Odin and untap 2, so while you did have to spend 1 Dawn to use Momonosuke's effect, you do walk away with an effective Dawn surplus of 1 because you paid 1 but got 2 after you discarded, and you discarded the card for free. You didn't have to discard any of your other previous cards, so this is pretty good. I really like this card. Next is Komurasaki, an uncommon, whose cost is 1, attribute is Wisdom, again no power, and counter is 1000, who's from the land of Wano and is also a Kozuki clan member, whose effect is on play. You can pay 3. If your leader is Odin, set a land of Wano type card with 3 or less as active. That's very cool. It's like a secondary pseudo Kinemon. You don't get Kinemon's main effect, but you get a much cheaper version of it for effectively 4, and you can just untap some of the 3 later from Odin's effect. And while it is on play, you may end up wanting to run cards like Law that let you bounce cards, but this is very neat, and it's just more green multi-attacking, and this is also searchable off of Momonosuke. So for 1, you can search her, then play her, and then play 3 for a total of 5. You can effectively get a card and untap a 3 for effective 5 drop, which is a bit expensive, but the fact that she's searchable is mostly what I want to highlight. So this is very interesting. I am loving the Green Wano deck. I might have a new favorite above Kaido now. This looks so cool. Next is Shinobu. I it's not original art, it's from the anime, but I love the zoom in effect on her face. I just think it's really funny. It's a vanilla, so 3 cost special attribute, power 5, counter 1, land of Wano, no effect. This is, again, the basic stat line we would expect from a card like this, but the fact that it's Land of Wano and has 5 means it's searchable off of Momo, and it's cost 3, which means she is re-standable off of both Kinemon and Komurasaki, so she likely may see play just because of that. A Shachi, and this is very, very cool, cute art, rather. I like his little hand in the pocket and the little star glimmer effect and the law flag in the background. This is just cute. His cost is 3, attribute is Striker, power 4, counter 1, color green, type Heart Pirate, who is a blocker, and on play, if you don't have a penguin, play a penguin from your hand. This is neat. We've seen a similar effect like this with the ulti from the Kaido start deck, so it depends on what the penguin cards do, because somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you can play any penguin and not just like a specific penguin from, say, the Romance Dawn set, and if that's the case, this could potentially get better over time if we get more penguins. So I'm not super wowed by the cards like this because it does require you to have 2 cards in hand already, but the fact that it lets you play a card for free is pretty decent, so it definitely depends a lot on what the penguins do and if you even want to run them. But a 3-drop 4 power blocker isn't that much to... it is already pretty good on its own, so... Next we have Jean Bart, whose cost is 4, attribute is Strike, power is 6, counter is 1, and is a Heart Pirate. It's a vanilla, we've come to expect this. Next is Denjiro, whose cost is 5, attribute is Slash, power is 7, type is Land of Wano and a part of the Akazaya 9, whose effect is Dawn 1 when attacking. If your leader is Odin, set up the 2 Dawn is active. So it's like a higher costed but better version of the Inuarashi. This is very good. Yes, you can't restand it with Komurasaki or with Odin, but giving it 1 Dawn means you can untap 2, which means you can potentially untap a total of 4 thanks to Odin for an effective Dawn 1 and discard 1 if you combine them. This is very neat. I'm actually kind of liking this style of ramp. I'm realizing more than the purple style, where instead of getting more Dawn cards, you just reuse the ones you already have. I'm digging this. Next, we have a Super R in Trafalgar Law, whose cost is 5, attribute is Slash, power is 6, type is Supernova and Heart Pirate, who is a blocker, and on play you may return one character to your hand to play a character card with a cost of 3 or less from your hand. This is going to be seeing play in the Odin deck because provided you have either enough Dawn or the means of untapping Dawn, like with Odin and Denjiro, you can attack with a 3 cost or less, play Komurasaki, use her effect to untap a 3 cost, attack with that 3 cost again, play Law, bounce Komurasaki, play Komurasaki because she's only a 1 drop, and if you have Odin and Denjiro, you could use Komurasaki's effect again to untap that 1/3 cost you've been recycling. This is a great card and is like I would be so shocked if this wasn't going to be run in the Odin deck. Next is Nekomamushi. I like this art for him, whose cost is 2, attribute is slash, powers 3, counter is 1, whose types are Mink, Land of Wano, and Akazaya 9. On play, rest one of your opponent's characters with cost 3 or less. This is decent. Like I said, with Izo, I don't know how I feel about during your turn resting, but being able to target blockers for this is pretty good. And because, thanks to stuff like Komurasaki, it seems like this deck is also going to go a multi-attack route. Tapping blockers may actually be something that you're going to want to do. So I can definitely, now that I'm seeing more of the green cards, I can actually see stuff like this seeing play. Next is Beppo. Incredible art for my man. Cost 4, attribute strike, power 4, counter 2, type Mink and Heart Pirate. Dawn 1, when attacking, play a Heart Pirate other than itself with a cost of 4 or less from your hand. This is good for mana conservation. Giving it 1 Dawn means it can hit a leader, so again, you're probably going to do that anyways, and you can just play a card for free from your hand. This is quite good. I actually really like this if I end up building a pure Heart Pirate deck, which I don't know if is even possible because it doesn't look like there's a... Oh, wait, there's the Law leader that I'm not going to go over because I'm not doing multicolored. This looks pretty cool. I definitely like Beppo like this. And here's the Penguin to go with the Shachi, and it looks like based on the background, they're supposed to have connected art, which is very cute, whose cost 3, attribute is strike, power 2, counter 1, color, green, type Heart Pirate, who is another blocker, and if you don't have Shachi, you can play a Shachi. This is actually pretty neat because they're both 3 cost blockers that can play the other. So effectively for 3 costs, you can just play 2 blockers. And if you wind up having multiple copies, you can just sequence him. Like if you have 2 Shachis and a Penguin, you can go Shachi, play Penguin, and then Penguin play the other Shachi in your hand for an effective 3 drop. It requires setup, of course, but that's actually pretty neat. This is cool. This is neat. Then is our next SR being Kid, whose cost is 8, attribute is special, power is 8, type is supernova, and a Kid Pirate, whose effect is Dawn 1 during your opponent's turn. If this character is rested, your opponent cannot attack any other character besides itself. That's very interesting. It's basically a forced blocker that you can attack with. That's very cool. And it also has very high stats, so it isn't even going to be that easy to hit into Kid to begin with, and they have to waste probably a decent amount of Dawn to be able to do it. That's very cool. And that's only its first effect. Its second effect is active main. Once per turn, you may rest this character to play a character with a cost of 3 or less from your hand. This is actually... That's so good, because yeah, you have summoning sickness, so it can't attack, but it has a means of resting itself. So if you really need to go on the defensive, you can immediately just give yourself that 8k buff from it. This is amazing. I'm loving green so far. I'm actually surprised by how much I'm just loving what this deck is supposed to look like. Next is Raizo, who I did get spoiled about this one a little bit ago, so I know he's good, whose cost is 3, attribute is slash, power is 4, counter 1, type is Land of Wano, and Akazaya 9. His effect is when he is attacking, if you have 2 or more rested characters, you can draw a card. Quite good. As we've seen from some of the cards like Momo, they have means of resting themselves, so you don't even need to attack before Raizo to do it. And because it doesn't require a hit or anything, if you really need the draw, you don't even need to give Raizo Dawn. You can just swing 4,000 into something with or hit a character with that you can hit and still get the draw out of it. That's pretty cool. And it's also a 3 cost, which while you only get 1 draw, it is another viable target for Komurasaki and Kinemon. Next is Wire. I was not expecting this art on this guy. Wow, they really gave him fishnets. Shout out to my boy Wire. I care about him a lot more out of this art than ever before in the actual series. So his cost is 2, attribute slash power 4, counter 1, who's just a kid pirate. He's a vanilla with stats we've come to expect. Next is our next rare, who is Diaz Drake, whose cost is 5, attribute is slash power 6, counter 1, supernova, navy, and Drake pirate, whose on play effect is to KO one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less. I think this is going to see play in most green builds just because it has solid stats and it knocks out a character for free, which is pretty rare outside of purple. So just for this is probably going to see play. This is a solid card. Next, we're finally on to the events and no more characters. Who the first one we have is You Can Be My Samurai, whose cost is 1, and it's a Land of Wano and a Kozuki clan member. And its effect is you may rest 2 of your characters to draw 2 cards. I'm not sure how to feel about that. I think rest, like, it's great if you're at a point where your characters have summoning sickness, so they can't even attack. But putting, depending on who it is, some cards at risk doesn't seem amazing. But you have a wait. Let me check Komurasaki actually, because if Komurasaki doesn't rest herself, that's a very solid target. Komurasaki doesn't need to rest herself, so if you play Komurasaki, you can play You Could Be My Samurai and have one very easy target because, you know, it's not like you're going to be attacking with a power 0 character. And Momo has to rest itself, so he's unfortunately not a target for You Can Be My Samurai. But if you wanted to draw more than a specific search, you could use him as one. So I think you'll probably run this probably at 2 or 3. I doubt you'd want to max out on this. Next is an uncommon event, which is Demon Face from the scene with Hawkins fighting Kizaru. Cost is 6, so it's pretty hefty for an event. It was Supernova and a Hawken pirate, whose main effect is you can KO 2 of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 5 or less. Why isn't this in purple, if I'm being honest? Like, yeah, there's the king that can KO a card with 3 or less and 2 or less, but being able to hit 2 things with 5 or less seems so up purple's alley. Yes, they have to be rested, but like, I don't know if this is going to see play in green because of its effect, but if anything, you could run it in Odin, because if you have Denjiro ready to attack and Odin, you can effectively untap 4 of the 6, so this will likely see play in at least some green builds. Next is Paradise Waterfall, an uncommon event, whose cost is 1, and it's a Land of Wano and part of the Kozuki clan. It's a counter where your leader gets 2,000, and then you can untap a character who, and also has the trigger where you can KO one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less. This is quite good. So it's your basic 1 cost for 2,000, but you can, if somehow you have a blocker that did not die, you can reuse its block for a later attack, which I think this will likely see play. At the very least, it's a Kozuki Land of Wano specific event that can give power during your opponent's turn, and it has a trigger. The trigger isn't phenomenal because it has to be rested, so you can't use it to pop a potential attacker, but it's definitely something worth noting. Just if an opponent has a problematic card you want to get rid of but don't want to spend an attack on your next turn doing. So this is another card likely we'll see play at least with the Odin deck. Next is Punk and Gibson, a rare event, who is 2 cost, a supernova, and a kid pirate. Counter your leader or one of your characters gets 4,000, then rest one of your opponent's characters with 4 or less, and trigger you can rest one of your opponent's characters. This is what I'm talking about. It gives a massive power buff, and it also slows down your opponent's attacking, and it has a solid trigger. This is really good. I feel like this is going to see play in Odin too, just because it's not locked to like a kid pirate leader. This is a great event card. Next is Baben. I think that's how it's supposed to go. Its cost is 3, and it's a Land of Wano type event card. During the main phase, you can trash a Land of Wano from your hand to set one of your Land of Wano characters with cost 3 or less active. This is another way of multi-attack. It has 3 costs, so it's decently pricey for an event as opposed to a character with an on-place ability like Komurasaki. But it's just another way of getting another attack. You can just stack a couple of Dawn on a decently studded card like Shinobu and just keep recycling her attacks and keep untapping with stuff like Denjiro and Odin. So I think this is another pretty solid one. Next is the secret rare, which is Yamato. Love it. I love that gold effect. I love the way the club comes off of the art. This is stellar. I love the gray, black, and white background. This is beautiful. Uh, Yamato deserves nothing less. It's her. The cost is 5. The attribute is strike. The power is 5. Counter is 1. And he's all Yamato is also a land of Wano type card, so it might see play in Odin. It's also this card's also treat this card's name as Kozuki Odin according to the rules. This is very interesting. I think at this point the only card that referenced Kozuki Odin was the Kinemon Super Rare, and that specified an Odin leader, I believe. Let me double check that. But uh, it's if your leader is Odin. So this doesn't work. So far, that effect doesn't really do anything, but it opens down the line for later support and for a lot of potential, just for if you have a Kozuki Odin on your field, or a Kozuki Odin character, or a card that only affects Odin. But this is very neat, and if nothing else, it's a phenomenal flavor when its effect is it has double attack. So for those of you who don't know, because it's the first time we've seen it in one of my videos, when it hits a leader, it does 2 damage as opposed to 1, and it also has banish, so the cards you hit will go into the trash without being triggered or going into the hand. This seems very good. It absolutely has a kill on sight effect where you're going to put everything into blocking Yamato, and then you're going to put all of your attacks into either stopping Yamato or going for the kill. But this seems very solid, and I think it loops back after the secret. Yeah, it does. So, all in all, I am loving green. I looked at a lot of the start decks, and I think purple was my favorite then, and green was probably my second or third favorite after that. But looking at all of the cards for Odin, I am so in love with a lot of these cards, and I really hope this deck actually is viable in the meta, because I want to play this deck and I want it to be good. This is the stuff that like makes me already want to get invested in this game before the first set is even out yet. The green stuff for Odin looks so cool, and I'm so excited to try out this deck. But let me know your guys' thoughts on the cards. Are there anything you think I got wrong? Anything more you want to see? Anything within green specifically that you want to see? Please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching another one.